Today we answer the question, but can it run Stalker 2? Those of you who are Crysis fans know exactly what I'm talking about. Stalker 2 leverages the brilliant next-gen graphics of Unreal Engine 5 with all its bells and whistles. Features like Nanite and Lumen are used to bring the open world of Stalker 2 to life, casting it in a new, visually stunning light. But of course, this comes at a high price, and that price has to be paid by us, the players, in hardware. NVIDIA has released the official benchmarks for Stalker 2, and in this video we'll check out together what resolution and FPS you can achieve with different graphic cards. A small spoiler up front, this game is hungry. But first, it's only fair that console players get their updates too. On the Xbox Series X, Stalker 2 is expected to run smoothly at high settings, aiming for a stable 60 FPS, though it may occasionally drop to around 55 FPS in more demanding moments. Unfortunately, there aren't too many further details available at this time. For the Series S, however, we have some specific numbers. The game is anticipated to average around 35 FPS on this console, with assurances that it will never dip below 30 FPS. This information was shared by the developers themselves in an interview with Windows Central at Gamescom 2024. I'm personally hoping we'll get to see some console gameplay videos released before the official launch to get a better sense of performance and visuals. If you're still unsure whether the performance will meet your expectations, consider waiting for in-depth reviews or think about trying it through a Game Pass subscription when it releases. The official system requirements for PC have just been updated, so let's take a look at those first. With an Intel Core i7 7700K or AMD Ryzen 5 1600X processor, a GeForce GTX 1060, Radeon RX 580 or Intel Arc A7050 graphics card, and 16GB of RAM, you'll be able to play at a resolution of 1080p with 30 frames per second. For 1080p at 60 FPS, you'll need to step up to an Intel Core i7 9700K or AMD Ryzen 7 3700X processor, an RTX 2070 Super, RTX 4060 or Radeon RX 5700 XT graphics card, and again 16GB of RAM. For the recommended settings of 2K resolution at 60 FPS, you'll need an i7 11700 or Ryzen 7 5800X processor, an RTX 3070 Ti, RTX 4070 or Radeon RX 6800 XT graphics card, and 32GB of RAM. Finally, if you want to experience the game at epic settings with 4K resolution and over 60 FPS, you'll need an i7 13700KF or Ryzen 7 7700X processor, an RTX 4080 or Radeon RX 7900 XTX graphics card, along with 32GB of RAM. You'll also need around 160GB of storage on an SSD for all the aforementioned setups. Traditional HDDs won't cut it here. But before we continue, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're interested in more Stalker 2 news, info, guides and content, even well after release, this is the place for you. I'm already hard at work on more videos to keep you entertained and informed up until launch. Thanks to NVIDIA, in addition to the official system requirements, we now have detailed benchmarks for PCs and laptops, so let's dive into those specifics. First, it's worth mentioning that all PC benchmarks were conducted on a Windows 11 desktop with an i9 14900K processor and 64GB of RAM, with all in-game quality settings set to maximum. The benchmark displays frame rates in two formats: FPS without DLSS, shown in gray, and FPS with DLSS enabled in quality mode, along with frame generation, an exclusive feature of the RTX series, displayed in green. If you play Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl at 1080p resolution, you can expect the following FPS results. The RTX 4060 reaches 43 FPS without DLSS, while with DLSS in quality mode and frame generation it achieves a respectable 85 FPS. The RTX 4060 Ti performs slightly better, delivering 47 FPS without DLSS and 96 FPS with it enabled. Moving up to the RTX 4070, you can expect 67 FPS without DLSS, which nearly doubles to 125 FPS with DLSS active. The RTX 4070 Super provides 76 FPS without DLSS, jumping to 141 FPS when DLSS is enabled. With the RTX 4070 Ti Super, the performance reaches 82 FPS without DLSS and 152 FPS with it. The RTX 4080 Super shows a more modest improvement, achieving 84 FPS without DLSS and increasing to 161 FPS with DLSS. Finally, the flagship RTX 4090 reaches 85 FPS without DLSS, rising to an impressive 165 FPS when DLSS is enabled. Next, let's take a look at how these GPUs perform at a resolution of 2560 by 1440 pixels, also known as 2K or 1440p. With the RTX 4060 Ti, the performance becomes somewhat limited, reaching just 34 FPS without DLSS, though it improves to 72 FPS with DLSS 3.0 in quality mode and AI-supported frame generation. The RTX 4070 fares better, achieving 52 FPS without DLSS and 100 FPS with it enabled. Starting with the RTX 4070 Super, the experience becomes more fluid, with nearly 60 FPS without DLSS and 114 FPS when DLSS is active. The RTX 4070 Ti Super manages 66 FPS without DLSS, increasing to 127 FPS with it. Moving up to the RTX 4080 Super, you can expect 73 FPS without DLSS and 135 FPS with DLSS. Finally, the top-tier RTX 4090 reaches 75 FPS without DLSS, which rises to 145 FPS when DLSS is enabled. For those aiming to play in 4K or 2160p to push the game to its limits, the performance is as follows. The RTX 4070 manages the bare minimum with 31 FPS without DLSS, but this improves significantly to 73 FPS with DLSS 3.0 providing a solid boost. The RTX 4070 Super reaches 34 FPS without DLSS and a respectable 87 FPS with DLSS enabled. The RTX 4070 Ti Super achieves 41 FPS without DLSS, rising to 100 FPS with DLSS. Moving up to the RTX 4080 Super, this card reaches 47 FPS without DLSS and hits 112 FPS with it enabled. Finally, the flagship RTX 4090 once again delivers 52 FPS without DLSS, still shy of the magic mark of 60 FPS, but with a strong 124 FPS with DLSS 3.0 enabled. And you're probably thinking, wow, this game must be really poorly optimized, not even 60 FPS with the latest hardware without relying on DLSS. But the reality is that there are very few games where you can play at native 4K resolution with max settings and get solid FPS without DLSS. Keep in mind that we're talking about a massive open world game built in Unreal Engine 5. The game is inherently demanding on hardware due to the sheer scale and openness of its world. Even consoles, which often advertise 4K resolution and high frame rates because it sounds better, rarely achieve true native 4K and even more rarely hit 60 FPS in that mode. In most cases, the image is upscaled to 4K, which naturally reduces image quality. Gaming in true native 4K remains extremely hardware intensive, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. For those of you wanting to play Stalker 2 on a laptop, I have two benchmark results to share. First up is gameplay at 1080p resolution with maximum settings tested on a system equipped with an i9 13980HX processor and 32GB of DDR5 RAM. Without DLSS, the RTX 4050 laptop GPU starts at 37 FPS, while the RTX 4090 laptop GPU can reach up to 81 FPS. With DLSS 3.0 enabled in quality mode and AI-powered frame generation, performance increases to 73 FPS with the RTX 4050 and an impressive 155 FPS with the RTX 4090 laptop GPU. For a resolution of 2160 by 1440, the performance looks like this. Starting with the RTX 4070 laptop GPU, you can expect 37 FPS without DLSS and a decent 76 FPS with DLSS enabled. The RTX 4080 laptop GPU delivers 56 FPS without DLSS, which increases to 110 FPS with DLSS. Finally, the RTX 4090 laptop GPU achieves 62 FPS without DLSS, rising to a solid 124 FPS with DLSS active. I hope these benchmarks help answer the question, but can it run Stalker 2 for your system? If you're still unsure, it might be best to wait for the initial reviews, which should likely be released no later than 2 days before launch. Alternatively, consider purchasing the game on a platform that offers a refund option if the performance doesn't meet your expectations. For example, Steam allows you to refund any game within the first 2 hours of playtime without needing to provide a reason, so you really can't go wrong there. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if Stalker 2, assuming it lives up to all our expectations, gives hardware sales a nice boost around the holiday season. But that's it for this video. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. Have a fantastic day and I'll catch you in the next one.